Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I hope you had a good morning and first session. I thought it went very well. So I think it was a good start to the day. Just a couple of comments before we go into the session. Firstly, a reminder about the evaluation forms. Those forms are very, very important to us. How we plan, how we think, how we can develop the conference. And after all, it's your conference. So please share your ideas with us. Tell us what we can do to make the conference even better than it is, if that's possible. There will also be, at the end of this session, a voting survey, a bit like we did yesterday. So please have your smartphones, your tablets, your iPhones, iPads to join the voting. So if you can, I think you can even, my children would be able to scan this somehow and get it directly on their iPhones, onto their tablets. So if you're, actually most of you look older than me, so forget what my children do. On that point, I've noticed that a lot of my business cards are being sold on eBay. So please, this is supposed to be a business environment. You shouldn't profit from the fact that you know me unless you share. So, but now we're looking at multimodal Mexico. Automotive logistics globally. It's something that we talk about globally at our conferences, is trying to make the conference, logistics in the region multimodal. I'm very fortunate to have discussions with different governments around the world, including Mexico, but also India, China, etc. And I think it was the Indian government who sent me the simple task of, in a meeting with their Minister of Transportation, Louis, can you just help us make Indian logistics multimodal? So I said, yeah, no, that's a problem. I can have that done by tomorrow. What do you want me to do on Friday? So hopefully the discussion is as simple in Mexico. We've been very fortunate to get a panel together that looks at different sectors. We've got the involvement from the Secretariat of Communication and Transport, which of course is vitally important. We've got looking at some innovative road solutions, looking at the rail and looking at capacity, and also with an impact on the sea and the ocean side of things as well. So I think that's a good panel that can help us have these to move these discussions forward. The usual rules apply. Firstly, the presentations can be in Spanish or English, so have your translation headsets ready. The presentations will continue, all in a row. They will finish their presentations, and then we go to the Q&A at the end. You don't have individual Q&A at the end of each presentation. So I'm very delighted to have as the first speaker of the session someone who was one of the most popular speakers last year, and someone I've had a chance to keep the contact going over the last year or so. I'd like to welcome to the podium David Carrillo Murillo, the Director of Multimodal Corridors and Logistics from the Ministry of Communication and Transport. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much for Louis for inviting me here to give a space to the Ministry of Communications and Transportation. I don't know if you want me to present or in Spanish or English. I don't know if could you raise, because they said me it was a question of the Ministry of Economy. So could you raise the hand if you speak English, at least for? I think it's English. So we stick it like that, and then we continue. When they invited me, they raised this question: is the investment infrastructure keeping up with demand? And actually, it's a hard question to follow, because we started, as you may know, with the National Program of Infrastructure, which it was really promising. But we had this year that is quite difficult for finances in Mexico, and we are sticking with the projects with provide better services for more demand. So, could you please continue with the next slide, or how is this one? Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's not working, so maybe manually.
We do it manually.
Okay. It's not working. Anyway, so the agenda will be, I will show you how the automotive construction and the plants are that we have in Mexico are increasing the demand, and then actually how we can, or how we, the government, plan to manage that. And then I finish it with a, it's not a presentation. Sorry. Could you please put, this is not the presentation. Is it working? Okay, so there. I'm sorry, I just put the presentation in Spanish, but still I will present in English. So I will show you the importance of the automotive sector in Mexico, then the production that we have, the national production, the future production, and some advances with the National Program of Infrastructure. Then I will show you an initiative that we keep up with the Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Communications and Transportation, and we will end up with some logistic corridors that we plan to improve with infrastructure. Could you please put the next slide? Okay, sorry. Here, we have this national data. We know that there is 645,000 workers in the automotive sector directly. The exportation of vehicles is increasing a lot, but actually we are stick with America, as you may know. 91% of the vehicles produced here are exported to the US. Then we have 5% with the next client of Mexico, which will be, or is Europe, then Asia, and then the rest of the world. We are the first producer in Latin America, and we actually recovered quite well in the production of vehicles from 1.5 million to 3.4 million from 2009 to 2015 after the crisis. This is some graphs from the ProMéxico, which is in part of the government in Mexico promoting the investment in Mexico. So with some sources of the AMIA and ProMéxico, they developed this map that shows the states that are producing actually cars, light vehicles, and their engines in several states. But the important thing here, this is the production of light vehicles, and then we have actually to show that the Estado de Mexico, which is one of the most promising ones, which is in turn of Distrito Federal, now will be called Mexico City, is producing 360,000 cars per year. But if you take a look in the Bajío, which is actually in Guanajuato, the state of Guanajuato, they produce 560,000 cars per year. And then if we go and take a look in this small state that you already know, or maybe here, Aguascalientes is producing 588,000 cars. Also another important is Puebla, which is producing actually now with the Volkswagen 475,000 cars per year. But this is not only the important thing, this is now. The next slide shows the future production. And then we have many plants, and many plants that are planned to install in Mexico. I'm just losing too much time, but actually, you know, the Kia, that it's already been said in the conference I saw in the website. Kia will install in Nuevo León. Then we have the recent installation in the Bajío in Celaya of Honda, Mazda, and several other plants. But in total, we have a lot of production that we need to take out from the country or to provide infrastructure. So that's the National Program of Infrastructure. It takes into account the four modes of transportation. And we are also dealing with multimodal and logistics according to the national development plan from this sexenny. So in the third report of the government advances on the national program of infrastructure, they show that there is already 50% of capacity in the terminal in Lázaro Cárdenas, the port. There is also a terminal for containers and a terminal for multiple usages in Manzanillo. Then we have the new airport, the new international airport that will be built in Mexico City, and also an increase of 11% of cargo transportation by air. From some highways, then we have 17 new highways. There is 28 and 35 already in construction, and there is the modernization or the improvement of 45 federal highways, which represents 1,700 kilometers. From the railways, we have already the new railway terminal in Durango, which is connecting with Mazatlán after the construction of this highway that is actually reducing a lot the time between Durango and Mazatlán. Then we already finished the railway bridge from Matamoros and Brownsville. And then there has been a rehab of 38 railway crossings in Jalisco and Chihuahua. And we are actually at the 35% in advance in the railway tunnel of Manzanillo. That was after the improvement of all the area for changing the production of energy in that state. And this is the national or initiative of the national planning that we are developing between the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of the Communications and Transportation. It calls the National System of Logistic Platforms. It actually takes out all the information that we could grab from different associations, from the government, from different sectors, and then we are planning how to give a better connectivity, multimodal connectivity for these goods that need to go out from the country, but also for the intern commerce. So I show you just a state, or actually it's a region, the central region, that shows a bit of San Luis Potosí, for instance, how we can keep there an infrastructure that will help with these goods from different goods, which is included the automotive one, and that we need to improve all the connections and also the infrastructure for connecting transport modes. From the automotive cluster, for instance, there's a planning for Guadalajara in Jalisco, but there are also other goods that we need to improve, and we know that the best way is to consolidate goods, to improve the infrastructure, and then to give a better service. This is one of the results of this study that we developed. It's some logistic corridors according to their maturity. So you see that these two are the main corridors that they are consolidated, and then we try to give a vision of the lateral corridors that we need to develop. Okay. So I think I stop here because No, it's the end. It's short because I know that you will have a lot of questions, so I'm looking forward for your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, for giving us an idea of your plans. And I'm certain he's correct about the questions, because David is someone who's working very specifically on what we as a group in the room are trying to do. So I think it's a good opportunity to address some of those issues and raise some of those points. But next up, to look at what we looked, some ideas of solutions on how we can address some of these issues, I'd like to welcome to the stage Bill Pawluk, the Chief Executive of CTM Worldwide.
Buenos dias. Am I on? Can you guys hear me? Yeah, there we go. Yes, buenos dias is all I know. Buenos dias and Victoria, cerveza por favor. And that's about it. Gracias, maybe. So it's going to be in English, guys. Sorry to disappoint you. Okay. So, my name is Bill Pawluk from Convertible Trailer Manufacturing. I've met some of you before, but there's many faces that I do not know. So I'm excited to meet many of you and discuss this idea of ours. Our focus and our vision in convertible trailer manufacturing is about addressing the inefficiency and the empty mile factor in this industry. And so that's the general premise and how it relates, of course, to infrastructure. But I'll talk a little bit about Mexico itself, the little that I do know of it, because I'm new to Mexico. I've been here last year, I guess. And it certainly is impressing me what is happening here, having been around the world in many other markets. So from what I can see, Mexico, I think, is a very desirable place to do business today. And this condition that you're in today has been many years in the making. And so it's quite exciting to see the numbers continue to grow. You've got over 6,000 miles of shoreline, and you've got 29 ports on the Atlantic side, and I think 12 ports on the Pacific side, ocean ports. And you've kind of got a long, skinny country, so to speak. And so having that waterway access, I think, is tremendously enviable, I think, for many countries. Panama Canal to the south, and you've got a great big consumer market to the north. So you really are positioned well to do some business. So I think it's very exciting. So I think all of your forecasts are quite realistic, of 5 million by the end of the decade. So all of this, obviously, we're always talking about growth, and everybody's always excited about growth, and I can tell by the general demeanor of everybody here that everybody's really upbeat because they can see new business coming their way. So I think that's a great thing that I remember not too many years ago when things were not the same, 2009, 2010, when there was no optimism at many of these conferences. And here I see the exact opposite. So I'm really happy for everybody here for that. So you're the 4th largest vehicle exporter in the world now. That's quite an achievement, and yet you've got a long ways to go. 7th largest automotive manufacturer. There we go. We're going the wrong way here, or maybe we're fighting each other here. 21.9% increase from the first half of 2014 versus 2015. I think that's significant. The numbers do speak for themselves, of course. Now, according to our understanding, Mexico currently ranks 64th of 148 countries in terms of infrastructure. And I think that's what this topic is all about. And what can you do to improve your situation as far as infrastructure is concerned? To our understanding, there's about $600 billion, and that's a U.S. figure, so I don't know what that converts to in pesos, but that's what's slated for the next several years. So obviously there is something being done about infrastructure, but meanwhile, what do we do while that's all happening? Because business has to go on. I hear of road conditions being poor in some areas, and of course rail being insufficient. So, and I think those are underway. So what I'm here to talk about, though, is we want to squeeze the juice out of the lemon as absolutely much as possible. Every mile that we make on road, rail, and ocean in this country, I think, should be utilized absolute maximum. So that's going to be through innovation. We hope that that's what we do represent. So I am here as CTM, of course, and once again, we are here to talk about empty miles, and that's what I do want to focus on. I'm not here to sell our concept. I'm here to talk about the problem in the industry. And of course, you're going to hear about our solutions. We're the only ones that I know of in the world that are addressing the problem in the fashion that we are. So understand that for what it is. Empty miles wastes billions. This is an industry-wide discussion around the world. There is about $75 billion worth of annual loss in the industry because of empty miles. So the tip of the iceberg, of course, is the empty miles, partial and complete, and then all of the other associated problems, especially with outbound automotive logistics. It's such a specialized piece of equipment that you need specialized equipment and you need specialized people. And those two together really create a very isolated environment. And therefore, you have limitations, all kinds of limitations. 8 billion liters of fuel wasted annually around the world. That's a significant number. I know the price of oil is cheap today, but one day it's going to go back up. And it shouldn't really matter. I think it's irresponsible of all of us if we're going to just say, oh, well, that's okay, that's how business is done. I refuse to accept that simply because we're used to doing something a certain way. We load up our trucks one direction and we go deliver our vehicles. We load up our rail cars one direction, deliver them. Same thing with Ro-Ro. And quite often everybody comes back empty. Why do we accept this? Why do we say that's okay? Just because we've been doing it for the last 100 years? The financial complications associated with the automotive logistics industry today is better than it used to be, but because there's growth. But not so long ago, there was all kinds of financial complications when the industry was imploding or contracting. There was a lot of banks that wouldn't look at the auto logistics industry. Auto transportation people were having all kinds of difficulties trying to do something, trying to expand, trying to buy anything, service anything. So it's a significant thing. What could happen if we could change that? The utilization factor is estimated to be below 25%, and that is a number for road units. And I suspect that the number is probably similar in rail and ocean, but we can't confirm that. Just knowing some of the basic facts about both those modalities tells me that we're probably running the same kind of numbers. So, what are we doing at CTM to change this? So here we have just a visual for you. And I ask everybody in the room, next time they drive down the road and they see an auto carrier, and here in Mexico, of course, you have the side curtains that conceal the load inside, but try to take a peek to see what's on there. Is there a load on there or is there not? And this is a game I played even with my kids when we were traveling somewhere. Who could count how many auto carriers are out there and how many are full, how many are empty? And this is something we did just to pass the time, and the number came out quite consistent. The empty factor in auto carriers in North America, for example, is approximately 42% on the finished vehicle side. We think the number is higher than that here in Mexico. And we know that sometimes there's isolated situations where you have an automotive haul one direction and then the other, of course, and that's great when you have balanced runs, but often you do not. So from our perspective, what do we do to make the equipment more versatile? Again, in road, rail, and ocean. This is a visual of what we have practiced actually I had a transport company at one point in Western Canada, and I ran conventional carriers, and I was new to the business, and I just said, why are we running empty all the time? Can't we change this equipment to somehow be more versatile? So this is where this whole idea came from. And we did a lot of movement between Canada and the US, and I found that, yeah, with a convertible style piece of equipment, which we developed right from scratch, a convertible style piece of equipment, we lose anything on the outbound or head haul side, but then we suddenly had some equipment that could do something else. And if you try to bring automotive outbound logistics with general freight logistics, things can happen. So I made some money from that. So ever since then, I've been promoting the concept because I believe that if it worked for us, it can work for everybody in this room, everybody in the automotive logistics industry, because with our research, it tells us that this problem exists all over the world. And we know that the solution does exist. We've done it. So in this particular case with Mexican regulation, you guys can pull B trains. And B trains actually were originally developed in Canada, of all places. That's where I'm from. Anyhow, we got big expanses to cover there. And that's why this innovation did take place. But you're allowed to do B trains here. And that, in turn, could give you the opportunity to perhaps haul containers coming home. I just want everybody to think about that and understand whether we should continue accepting the present situation or should we do something about it. Convertible style logistics. We work with a company out of Germany that we've partnered with that talks about how we can, from a software perspective and intelligence logistics platforms, take existing information on automotive outbound side and automotive inbound side, for example, and analyze that data to see where the synergies actually do exist on the outbound side versus the inbound side. So if you have the hardware that can now do something beyond just automotive, all of a sudden these new possibilities take place. But just providing the hardware is one thing. We need to do it intelligently. We believe that we should be able to take all of the automotive logistics outbound data and combine it with the automotive inbound data, be agnostic about who it's for, and see what's going on there. We've done preliminary studies already on such historic data, and the results are very exciting. And those studies we've done so far in Europe, and now we're moving into North America to further understand all of these possibilities. So automotive outbound, parts inbound, and then general freight flows. What could happen if we could take automotive outbound and bring it closer to general freight logistics? Automotive outbound plays all by itself over here, and therefore the opportunity of true industry scale isn't realized. Yet it seems like we're doing well, and I think we actually are, but there's a gaping hole of 40 to 50% just sitting there waiting for somebody to do something about it. And I don't think we as a single company can do anything about it by ourselves. I think that it's going to require the entire industry to say, okay, enough of this, let's change our bad habit, and let's get together and start figuring out these logistics. We're not logistics experts. We're providing you the tools in which to do your business better. Oh, okay. So, combining inbound, outbound, and general freight logistics. That's what we propose that should be done. And we're going to provide the hardware. We're going to bring a convertible style road piece of equipment to Mexico, hopefully this year or early next, and start practicing some convertible style logistics on the roadways. Anyhow, Lohr Industries, if anybody of you know, there is a Lohr plant here in Mexico. There are partners for this project. They share in the vision of convertible style logistics, convertible style equipment. And so they are our partners around the world. They do have a system here, or a facility here, and they do supply conventional carriers as it stands today. And we hope to change that fairly soon. There's also rail products that have a new spin on them, things that aren't common to the industry. This is practiced in Europe, where we can take our auto carriers, for example, in Europe, and put them onto a swivel type rail wagon. Suddenly taking a rail wagon and turning it into something more productive, something useful. We actually can put an auto carrier trailer right onto this, this system. And we're having more technical difficulties here. Here we go. And we can disconnect the tractor. This way we can continue with the delivery to the other end. And at the other end, we could deliver that load with another tractor. They go deliver their products. They turn around and they can come right back again and load a container on and come home, creating a full situation in very simplistic terms, full on both legs, A and B. It is possible. These are just ideas that we want to plant in your head to see if there's an application here in Mexico. We don't know, but we know that you need to use your infrastructure as absolutely best as you possibly can. So that's where these ideas are being driven. So between road, rail, ocean, and sometimes air, we're focusing on solutions. And again, we don't know that we have all the solutions. We know that we have some solutions. And I think that as more and more people get involved in this project, more and more ideas are going to reveal themselves. So we invite everybody in this room and anybody in the industry, anybody that's watching this, to participate in this. Contact us. And we've had many inquiries, and we're having these discussions. This is a new concept coming into the industry. We've been working at this for over a decade. We know it works, and we think that it can apply in your market as well. Another point that I do want to make is we're always excited when the market is in growth mode. Everybody's happy, everybody's planning, things are great. What happens when the market starts slowing down? And it's inevitable, it's not if, it's a matter of when you hit zero growth or negative growth. What's going to happen with your assets? And we saw how many bankruptcies took place all around the world during this last economic recession. And if your equipment was more efficient, is there not a possibility maybe that that could abate that situation somewhat? I think it can. So once again, I thank you for your attention and the privilege to speak here. And contact us if you have any questions. Thank you. Yeah, no worries.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill, for a solution, a possible solution to some of the, the waste in the industry. Waste is such an important factor. We talked about the waste in packaging yesterday, or packaging, how packaging can reduce waste, and we heard a transportation solution now. And next up, rail is obviously hugely important to the intermodal and the movement of goods, particularly in North America to and from the United States. Last year we had Ferromex, and this year we're delighted to have as speakers at our conference from Kansas City, Southern Mexico, KCSM, Carlos Velez, the VP of Business Solutions and Marketing. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Louis, very much for the invitation to KCS to participate in this excellent conference. I'm honored to be here at the podium with such distinguished speakers. Good morning, and thank you for the support of KCS, for those of you who are customers of KCS. We are continuing to collaborate with our rail partners to look for better solutions in Mexico to serve the needs of all businesses, and particularly the need of that of the automotive industry, which is in such a magnificent growth mode. I tried my best to cover the material which is listed in this slide in the 15 minutes that Louis has allocated to us. So I'll let you read through those. I'll cover each one of those as we go forward. So let's start a review of the automotive plant complexes in Mexico. Not having had the benefit of previewing all of the presentations that have been given over the last 2 days, there might be a little bit of rehashing of some of the information. We've taken some of the data from the AMIA data website, and so we've calculated some projections that we're going to share with you. We're going to talk about the projections from 2016 to 2020, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about a pattern that we see and how that impacts the rail capacity, which I believe is most important to you. Today's complex of manufacturing plants throughout Mexico tend to concentrate more toward the center of the country, and one of the primary reasons that we have been informed by the OEMs is that they want rail access. Rail is not the be-all to the auto industry, but it's certainly one of the primary and one of the key factors in the site selection criteria, and all of the OEMs have been, as of lately, seeking input from the rail companies. Sometimes, I wish it were all the time, but sometimes prior to making the final decision. There are many factors that involve the site selection, primarily those with the government and some of the incentives. And so we do end up being toward the end, and once the decision has been made, but we have been involved more as of lately with some of the rail infrastructure design for the new OEM facilities, which will tend to facilitate and expedite the service in the future. Based on this, when we look at 2016, we have the two new automotive plants coming up, both Kia and Audi, Kia and Pesquería Audi in San Jose, Chiapas. And then in 2017, we would look forward to the Chrysler and Infiniti facilities joining with Nissan in Aguascalientes. Then in 2019, with BMW in San Luis Potosí, we've been working very closely with them on the design for the rail facilities, as well as working closely with Toyota since their announcement of going to Paseo Grande in 2019. So as you can see, the distribution of most of these plants really are looking toward the center of the country and are looking at rail. These new plants, as we saw from Dr. Solis's presentation yesterday, will more than likely yield a total production of 5.3 million vehicles by the year 2020. What we look at as a railroad, really, with the most important trend number for us, or trend line for us, is the one in the middle. Unfortunately, you can't see it very well, but it's this trend line, which is what we plan on meeting the capacity. This is the export line year by year. And so these are the actual numbers for 2015 of 2.8 million vehicles that were exported out of the 3.41 million vehicles that were produced. We are seeing an increase in the export percentage because the new plants that are coming are much more focused on exporting to the United States and Canada. And so the current 81% overall export percentage is going to grow to a little bit higher, and we expect that to continue because of the type of companies that are coming to this geography. And so what I wanted to show here is tell you a little bit of a story as to how the railroads are looking at meeting and creating more capacity and meeting that requirement going forward. Today, 81% of all vehicles get exported, 19% obviously are for the domestic market. Of that 81%, it's not a play on numbers, but this is actual extrapolation of the numbers. 83% are destined for the United States and Canada, 17% are destined for the rest of the world. And when we look at just what moves cross-border, then of the 81%, not of 100%, 86% move via cross-border, and that is the number that we must pay attention to as a railroad industry, because that moves cross-border, whether it can move in some locations by truck, the vast majority of it moves by rail. And so that is what we utilize to project how we're going to be growing our trains. 14% of that 81% moves by water, and currently primarily via Veracruz, Altamira, and Lázaro Cárdenas to the U.S. When you look at the total exports from Mexico and what gets handled by water, then Veracruz stands out as the number one port, continues to be and has been for a long time because of the proximity of the plants close to them at 70%. Lázaro Cárdenas, however, has been growing significantly and is now handling 13% of the vehicles. Altamira handles 10%, and the rest of the port system in Mexico handles 7%. So those are the three ports that are really growing on the auto sector: Altamira, Veracruz, and Lázaro Cárdenas. Now let's take a look at how we measure capacity, how we look to meet your needs going forward. Based on the production forecasts that we had earlier, From 2015 to 2016, the production is going to increase by 200,000 vehicles. Well, we took that number and we say if 86% are going to move by rail primarily, if you were to give 100% of those vehicles to the rail carrier, and the rail carrier were to handle them, then that rail carrier would put, on average, 12 vehicles in a rail car unit, and we would generate 14,333 carloads, which means 211 trains per year at the current average of 68 rail cars per train, which is about 2 kilometers. And I'll explain why that's important to us in terms of adding capacity. And that means to us, based on 240 operating days, which is only 48 weeks of 5 days per week, that we as a rail industry, not KCS, I'm talking about a rail industry, would need to handle 0.88 trains per day additionally to what we're handling today. So when we look at the order of magnitude, this is not a significant increase, it's a significant growth in terms of number of vehicles produced, but given the cross-section of the pattern that we looked at, and given that 86% going northbound, and given the number of different routes, then we're looking at only an increase of 0.88 trains per day. Now, let's be fair and let's look at a 5-year projection. When you look at that increase, and we take the 86% and we look at 2018, for example, that growth in the 86% means 4.83 trains per day at 68 rail cars per train. If we look at 2020, we as an industry are going to require 7.47 trains per day additional to what we handle today. Certainly manageable, but there are a lot of things that could go wrong. They don't necessarily, the OEMs don't produce the cars in a very methodical way day by day. There are issues with quality and there are issues with interruptions on our own trains. And so we end up bunching up for certain plants. And so we're not going to be handling. Some days we may need to handle 20 additional trains in order to make up. And so that's what the railroads are concentrating on, is making sure that we have the capacity and that we're investing sufficiently to have that capacity to be able to manage the bunching up of trains that we see constantly. So suffice it to say that the Mexican railroads are keenly aware of the growth. We live it every single day. We work very closely with our North American network, and we manage jointly with North America and the OEMs the flow of the rail cars, because when the rail cars are under load in the United States above 50%, that means that there are less rail car availability for the plants in Mexico. So when for whatever reason, the rail network in the U.S. is not as efficient, or we're not able to load or unload as efficiently in the U.S., Canada plants, then Mexico has an issue with availability of empty rail cars, because all of the rail cars are in a pool, and slowly we're building a pool for Mexico, but it's just not yet large enough to be self-sufficient. And so the railroads are investing significant amount of money. The railroad industry is the industry that invests the most capital of any industry. So for every dollar that we receive from you over the last 5 years, on average, the Mexican railroads have invested about 28% of that dollar back into infrastructure improvements and infrastructure expansion. At a recent meeting we had with MUART, MUART is the Mexico-U.S. Automotive Rail Subcommittee from the AAR, and it includes a contingent of OEMs as well as all of the rail carriers and a number of service providers that participate to make sure that we are looking at the most efficient way of managing the rail service for the OEMs. And we shared individually from Ferromex and from KCSM where the major projects are coming for 2016. Every year, we have to make a commitment to the SCT of how much money we're going to spend in infrastructure improvements. And every year, we end up spending 40% more than what we have committed. These are the sites, the locations. We share this with you so that as an OEM or as a user of the rail industry, you have an opportunity to have a discussion with your commercial representative of that railroad company and address each one of these sites and specifically how the improvement or the change, whether it's double tracking, a bridge improvement, a yard expansion, a siding expansion, or a new siding, is going to impact your particular industry. I will tell you that both railroads have been negotiating with the labor union here in Mexico, and we have now agreed to extend the train length. I talked about 68 rail cars as an average train length today for the automotive industry specifically, because we're able to move, that's 2 kilometers when you include the locomotives. We're able to move 2.5 kilometers. And now we just agreed that if we have the extensions on the sidings, we can move up to 3 kilometers. And so when you look at 2.5 to 3, you automatically have a 20% increase in capacity for the railroad. And where the money is going to extending those sidings primarily. In 2015, the railroad industry in Mexico spent $582 million. Of those and then in 2016, we have committed to the SCT to spend $559 million. Of those, we have committed specifically for infrastructure and rail track improvements, $239 million. So it's not small change, it's very significant investment that we have committed. And primarily thinking of the auto industry, which is the fastest growing, but there are other industries as the steel industry and also for ag and minerals who are growing very fast. And with the energy reforms, we expect significant growth in crude by rail also in Mexico. Now let's look at Celaya, this is the last section of the presentation, and I wanted to show you what is going on in Celaya because it has come up in conversation with many of you. It comes up generally in most of these conferences. And people ask, why Celaya? Well, because all roads lead to Celaya. In reality, in our view, the Celaya bypass is the most important rail infrastructure project that we have in Mexico today. We want to call it to the attention of the SCT, call it to the attention of the Secretary of Economy, the Secretary of Treasury, that it is incredibly important for them to commit to conclude the commitment that they made since 2008 and finish this project as soon as possible. Where is Celaya? Most of you know where Celaya is, but it is a city of about 550,000 people, and both railroads cross the city east to west and north-south. Ferromex crosses east to west, and KCSM crosses north-south. The agreement made with the SCT in 2008 was that they wanted to remove that section of track from Ferromex, and instead of crossing through the middle of the city, provide a bypass to the south and going east, outside of the highway system, along with a commitment that they will control demographic growth of the city so that it would not continue to grow to the south, it would then continue to grow to the north. Because the way we saw this was that within 10 or 15 years, then the encroachment from the population will put us back in the same place that we were in 2008, and that we are today because the program is not finished. For KCSM, they committed to remove that section of track and replace it with a bypass also on the outside of the city. Luckily for one of the plants, which happened to be at this location, Honda, in the future will be one of the few plants that at that point in time would have had 2 direct rail connections. Today, we only have one, which is a temporary connection for them until the bypass is completed. Generally, when I make this presentation, I go through each one of the sections and I talk about the issues that we have within one of those sections. Because of the time, I'm only going to tell you that the bypass for KCSM is at 69.47% completed. The works have been halted because there is no budget, and so that is the issue that concerns all of us. Likewise, the bypass for Ferromex is 70.59%. Both of us have been at more or less 70% completion since August of 2015 when the government ran out of money and the works got halted. Finally, why is Celaya important? What is the intent for Celaya? In Celaya, we attempt to create a very efficient rail corridor. The fact that we have to cross so many at-grade crossings slows down the train. It creates an inordinate amount of vandalism that come within the state of Guanajuato and that continue over to the state of Querétaro. Speeding up the railroad will solve some of that problem, not 100% of the problem, as the Secretary of Economy alluded to yesterday, because there's organized crime and there's crime of chance. The crime of chance might go away, but the organized crime will follow where the cargo is. So we are working very closely with the federal and state authorities in different programs that have been relatively successful, not to the success rate that we look for or the OEMs look for, but we have joined hands very strongly with the OEMs to continue to push the government on doing their job. This is not a railroad job to secure the country. It is the government's job to secure the country. However, we spend inordinate amount of money and lots of contingents of people trying to secure the railroad, particularly through that section. So there are many issues that will continue to come about. But more importantly, what is our role? And when I say our role, I'm not talking about just the rail industry. I'm talking about you as the investors in this country. You're a foreign direct investment magnate bringing money into the country, and you have the power by bringing the government to the table and ensuring that this is paid attention to. So we ask that while we stay involved with the government at all levels, that the OEMs also voice their opinion at every opportunity, that they involve their government relations departments, and at every chance they have with the different ministries, that they bring this issue up as one of a very serious nature. In the meantime, KCSM and FXC have engaged in significant discussions with the federal government to look for alternatives so that we can potentially help finance the remaining 30% of the project so that we can provide a much better and much more suitable service to you, the OEM community, the auto industry. And with that, I will leave you with my contact information should you have any questions, and I'll be glad to take your questions at the end. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Carlos. As we said, rail is one of the most important transportation modes. It's a long trade lane, so the rail is particularly important. So it was good to hear about the investment and the plans and collaboration that's happening on the rail side. And next up, to look at some of the capacity issues, I'd like to welcome to the podium Roberto Zavala, the Managing Director for Mexico from Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics.
Thanks, Luis. Buenos días a todos. I'll keep going with the thread here, so I'll give this presentation in English. A year ago, when this conference took place for the first time, I was talking about rail car supply challenges. Then a few months ago in Detroit, I was talking about port infrastructure challenges. So now I'm going to talk about truck capacity challenges. I keep talking about challenges, but I think it's one of our duties as suppliers to create this awareness. The reason I also decided to talk about truck capacity was because it was a real big issue during 2015. The lack of trucks, especially towards the second half of the year, even created a situation where the dealers lost sales, which was unheard of from what I know. So I thought it was convenient to talk about it. This is not a picture from Mexico. I think this is somewhere in South Africa, but if I had to show one from Mexico, I would have needed to put a brand there, so I didn't want to advertise anyone. Basically, I'm going to cover a little bit of background and the market conditions for the trucks in Mexico, then the supply and demand and in 2015 and what created this problem. Then a little bit of the demand, what do we see coming with the explosion of the exports mainly, and then the road ahead, what do we see coming in 2016 and moving on. So basically, it's just some of the numbers. Again, total production for 2015, 3.4 million units. It was a 6% growth over last year. And if you break that down, 680,000 around is for domestic, and 2.76 million are for exports. 1.93 go by rail to the US and Canada, so most of it, and then around 830,000 to the ports. On the sales side, 1.35 million vehicles sold in 2015. That was a 20% growth over last year. Again, if you break that down, it's half and half between imports and domestic production. And you can also see there the break and the imports. It's around 180,000 vehicles moved by rail from the US into Mexico, and then the rest by ports. So where do we need trucks? Trucks, basically domestic production, everything that goes from the plants to the dealers. Then exports, 100% of the exports from plants with no rail connection or capacity, and 100% of exports to ports with limited rail access, Altamira, for instance. And finally, of course, all of the imports, because regardless if they come from the US by rail or from the ports, they end up in a railhead, and then from there, you need trucks to go to the dealers. And then finally, a percentage of exports or imports to cover railcar shortages. So where are vehicles sold? You can see here is mostly concentrated in the center of Mexico, 40% of all the vehicles sold within that area. And then 15% towards the Pacific, where Guadalajara is, 50% towards the north, Monterrey. So as you can see, just those that center corridor concentrates 70% of the vehicles sold. And then when you go north or south, if you have a truck running that way, you probably won't see it back in 2 weeks, around 2 weeks, because then the cycle times really expands. So supply and demand in 2015. We took a look at the demand for 2015. We came up with a number of around 1,900 trucks needed, again, in a perfect world, to move the amount of vehicles that was required. In this case, we believe 1.6 million vehicles were moved by truck. This is just the sales, and then, of course, the share of the exports. How is this composed? The number of trucks needed for domestic production, again, plant to dealers, 954, according to our analysis, which considers an average cycle time of 4 days. For domestic and imports, and 3.5 for exports. We also have some assumptions there for load factor and working days per year. Then the imports. The imports is a little tricky because you have imports from the ports, right? Veracruz, US, Lázaro Cárdenas, and other ports. But you don't need new trucks for all of that. There's some synergies coming from, if you send trucks to Veracruz, for instance, same truck is going to come back loaded. Not in all of the cases, but there certainly are some synergies. It could be much more. So due to those synergies, we're estimating 65% of all imports needs a new truck. So that's 615. And then the exports to all ports, we're estimating that around 30% of the exports to all ports move by truck. So then you need 307 in addition. So you end up with 1,876 trucks needed to cover the demand for 2015. So if we look at the capacity, just a quick snapshot, we're counting around 1,800 haulaway trucks available in Mexico. So we're 100 short, just right there, and in a perfect world, right? So we have around 3, long-established carriers that have more than 200 trucks. Some of them are here, and that covers a little more than 50% of the capacity. Then you have another 5 with more than 100, and then you're up to 84% of the capacity. 2 more with more than 50 trucks, and then there's other carriers and new players in the industry. There was 3 new carriers emerging during 2015 and added around 100 more trucks to the system. Again, we're only considering full long-haul trucks. There's some small trucks that are used mainly for local distribution. We're not considering those here. But The message here is that, capacity doesn't match, the supply doesn't match the demand to begin with. So what this created is, last year was, a perfect storm because the added capacity didn't match the sales growth. Even though more trucks were added, the sales growth was 20%, and right there you have a gap. Then there was production shifts that reduced some of the synergies achieved. So if you have some synergies in the Bajío area and you move production domestic to other areas, then those synergies are broken, and then you're going to end up needing more trucks. Then additional imports from ports increase the cycle times. Two new brands came into Mexico last year, and that required trucks from the ports to the dealers, and that increased the cycle times. Finally, there was a shortage of qualified drivers, a big issue that is shared by most of our partner carriers. Basically, new players coming in, and it becomes competitive, and it becomes challenging to get qualified drivers. So that was also an issue. And then finally, towards the second half of the year, extensive construction works in Mexico City and surrounding areas. So creating, again, a situation where you have increased cycle times. So a little bit on the demand outlook. What do we see coming, right? So the domestic sales are not going to grow substantially. We're looking at 6% growth year over year. It is really the exports which are going up. And of course, should current economical conditions remain, we're going to look at those 4.65 million units by 2019-2020. So if we had mentioned that we needed in 2015 almost 1,900 trucks, by 2016, or this year, sorry, there's going to be 2 new plants ramping up their capacity. One of the plants located in the north is not likely to have a rail connection in the beginning. We all know the issue there. And that's going to require trucks to haul the cars from the plant to the nearest rail heads. So that's going to require a lot of trucks because the volume is massive. And not really 2016, but 2017 is when it really explodes. So you can see there for 2016, 2,000 trucks needed, but then for 2017, 2,300, just because of this condition. And then 2018 goes down a little because hopefully there'll be a rail connection in the plant. If not, then there's really no need to pay attention to this because it's going to be more. So by 2019, 2,450 trucks needed. So as you can see, should current projections remain, we're going to need a lot more trucks in Mexico. Also, just another issue here: the vandalism in railroads has the potential to incentivize the use of trucks. Run faster, and they have less exposure to this, especially with the things that Carlos was correctly mentioning in that central area of Celaya. That's creating a lot of issues. Finally, the road ahead. What can we expect from 2016? That's just a picture. We should not expect more tequila for 2016, but maybe. So we'll see more new players in the market. The players that emerged during 2015 were also long-established carriers dedicated to dry vans, dedicated to container industry. So they do have the capacity to invest, and they see an opportunity here. We'll expect to see more of them entering the market. We believe those new players will invest while other carriers and long-established ones will be more cautious. They did their investments back around maybe 2006, 2007, when things were going up, and then crisis came, and there's a little bit of concern there. So we think they'll be more cautious. That doesn't mean they're not going to invest. And also, There's an issue now with the dollar, right? Because it's a small issue. Because right now we're at 35%, loss just in exchange, in currency loss. So if you order trucks from the manufacturing plant in Georgia, which is the most commonly used, just 6 months ago, right, and you pay 50% up front, that was a certain amount. Now when it is delivered, you're going to pay the other 50, but it's going to be probably 20% more money because of the fluctuations on the dollar. So that's becoming challenging for the truck carriers. We truly believe more synergies need to be achieved, right? Whenever this happens, you try to secure dedicated trucks, and you go to a trucking company, you try to secure, I need this one for me. But I think there needs to be more conversations between OEMs and also we as 3PL providers, as logistics providers, we need to get better at encouraging these type of conversations to create more synergies and really take advantage of the full capacity of the system. Also, finding reliable drivers will continue to be an issue. More players coming in. We know some of the companies, they're approaching this by creating schools, within their companies to really develop and grow their drivers from the early stage. And I think this is a very good approach. And finally, innovation. Right, when we have these type of situations, we need to promote innovation, maybe using centralized yards to deliver to the dealers. Right now, the truck goes all the way into the dealer in the middle of the city, center. And, there's restrictions with that. You cannot go into the city at certain hours, and it creates a lot of traffic. So maybe you can deliver to the dealers a little outside of the city or less congested areas. I don't know. There's many things that can be done, and we look forward to explore those with our partners. I think that's all I have. Well in time, Luis. So thank you very much.
Okay, we have thank you very much for that presentation. Obviously, the road capacity is a very important issue. So we've got a special guest speaker at the lunch, the Charge d'Affaires from the U.S. Embassy in Mexico. So, but it's very important to get to the discussion and have the opportunity to ask some questions and make your comments to such a distinguished panel. So we'll go to that quite quickly. But I want to start off the questions myself to David. You get a lot of requests. You've heard it just now about what everybody wants, this from the government and that from the government and this from the Secretary of Transportation. But do you feel that you receive the correct or the right kind of information to make these decisions? It's easy to say we want more port space, we want more better roads and so on, but do you feel that you get the right enough and correct information from, in this instance, the automotive industry to help you make efficient plans for investment and development?
Actually, with the study that I mentioned, that is called for the implementation of the national system of logistic platforms, we had a lot of information provided from the automotive sectors. But the problem is that the information that we have in logistics, it changes every 2 or 3 years. So actually, we need to keep up with this upgrade of information, because as we saw, just in Mexico, the plants or the construction plants, they change in 3 years. So we need actually to have this information, because everyone is complaining with the government, but no one is saying, okay, here there is these facts, these figures, we show what is the problem, and we need to solve it. An example that was explained already by Carlos Velez It's one of those ones. For instance, Celaya rail, the bypasses are really important for the national railway system. And we had a lot of problems with the state, with the people selling the land for building these bypasses. And at the end, we find a solution when the private sector is coming with the government, and then we develop a project together. I just profit because there is also an issue on safety on the railways. And actually there is an operation actually is done by the National Commission of Security in Mexico that is provided for the states in Querétaro and Celaya. And this is one of the first solutions to the whole problem, because it's not really easy to go out with that. Kansas City has provided a lot of information, is quite transparent in that, but we have sometimes the problems with the information that is not arriving completely from other concessionaires. So actually what you are asking is crucial for these sectors and for logistics. Logistics is actually done by the private sector, and then we need to catch this information to provide the better solutions together.
Thank you. Okay, so again, the usual rules. If you have a question, raise your hand, wait for the microphone. So I think there is a question on that side first.
Here. Thank you. My name is Enrique, and I work with Cello and Logistics in Mexico. Thank you very much for all the information that you have given us this morning. I think it's very valuable, and there's a lot of things that we had not considered before, like the growth with new plans and the growth in the U.S. and the Mexican market and all that. But well, looking at the map, I could see Cuba right there. Have we ever considered Cuba being a market for all this growth in the area? I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to open at some point, and those cars will have to come from somewhere. Have you considered that in the infrastructure that will be needed in, I don't know, in the Mexican railroads and the Mexican ports?
Okay, let me just answer or start to answer this question, because I think it's regional what you are talking about. And actually it's another issue that has been tackled by the government, but not with Cuba. That was from Mesoamerica. And there was a study to follow up the flows, logistic flows on that, and then to provide infrastructure. There is actually an initiative, and you can find it in internet. It's run by the Ministry of Relation. How would you call it in English?
Say it in Spanish.
Yeah, the Relaciones Exteriores. Sorry. And actually, they run this initiative 2 seasons ago to provide infrastructure to these flows. The problem that we find in these studies is that we have a lot of goods to provide to the other countries, but not coming back. And that's when I'm talking only about the south side of the country. With Cuba, that is different because we don't have this jurisdiction. Perhaps that could be a hub to provide that. But the infrastructure, the infrastructure conditions in Cuba, I don't think they are the best ones according to this growth that we are showing up. Perhaps in the long term, that could be an option. But actually, I think the main problem is to take out all the goods that are produced here, or that are coming here and then reproduced and then going out. And then actually, Carlos Velez was quite clear on that. We actually stick to the border, and those problems we need to tackle at first. So, thanks.
Roberto?
I've seen a couple of studies when it comes to Cuban ports, and that's something that's being explored. Really, I haven't really seen any projections yet, and I think this is more on the long run. But when it comes to the feeder or the network to serve that, of course, via ocean is right there. You have services that go into Panama and then there via feeder. So you have services from Veracruz or from Lázaro to Panama, and then via feeders you can serve all the Caribbean. So I think when it comes to that, it's pretty much in place. It'll be more about the just looking at the projection and also evaluating the condition of the port infrastructure.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll take this question first because he had his hand up, and then we'll come across. Thank you.
My name is Peter Koltai from Audi, Mexico, and I have two questions. Yesterday I have mentioned already that we see some issues with capacity of trucks for FPUs and capacities for train wagons. Now we have heard a pretty dark picture from you about this issue. What is your suggestion? First of all, what should we do as an OEM to get our cars in a proper condition to the US border by trains? That's the first one. It's about security. And the second one, what should we do now to make it sure that we have enough capacity for trucks to get our cars also to the ports and also to the borders?
Thank you. I'd like to address the rail section of the question, part of the question. As a railroad, we are working closely with the OEMs in defining the specific routes in which you're going to be exporting the vehicles. Based on that, we look at a long-term agreement both with you as an OEM and with TTX, which is the pool manager for rail cars in the United States or in North America now. And we commit to leasing or buying those assets. Remember, the assets for moving finished vehicles are 35 or 40-year assets. So not easy just to go with a forecast and go ahead and spend capital on building those multi-levels when you don't have the agreements or a backstop agreement with an OEM. We don't look for 35-year contracts, but we look for 5, 7, or 10-year contracts depending on the specific negotiations. Those are ongoing. They're ongoing right now with all of the OEMs that are building manufacturing in Mexico. The commitment from the rail companies is to go forward and to continue to build additional rail cars, and we're now moving to the Automax or multi-level concept that are more flexible and much more efficient for us to manage. In terms of security, when we look at the overall security for the railroad, we're at 99.98% secure. It is the same statistic as in the United States. However, in the US, KCS has 9 agents. In Mexico, we have 1,200. So to achieve that statistic requires a lot of money. To maintain it is an inordinate amount of money. We are working with the government, as David said, and we put together a program as of September 18 that has been ongoing. We're now looking to renew it because it ended at the beginning of this year, and now we're looking to renew it so that they can provide additional protection in the states of Guanajuato and Querétaro. A lot of work is going on to protect your cargo on our rails. But we have to work hand in hand with you, with your projections, your particular trade lanes, and with the government to continue to keep up the high percentage of safety. In those particular states, the safety is not as good. But we're working very hard to do that.
On the roadside?
Yeah, I can comment on the roadside. I think I could say, San Jose Chiapa is very, very well located. It's just about in the middle between Mexico City and Veracruz, and the flow of trucks there is just amazing. There's a lot of trucks flowing there. So with that, and also with the fact that the domestic volume, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand the domestic volume for the Q5, I mean, it's going to be relatively small. So even though the capacity is going to be challenging, it's a little less of an issue of when you have a bigger volume. However, just my recommendation is to, you have a good network and good capacity in combination with PW Group, and also always approaching the carriers in order to secure your capacity is the good way to go.
And David, have you got any thoughts for a car maker on on the road?
No, actually, it's just that, is to approach the government, because we only decide with the information that is provided to us. And sometimes, as we saw with this initiative, as I mentioned of this study, to acquire this information from the producers, not only from cars, from other sectors, is quite hard, because unless they have an incentive, then they give us the correct information. So actually, and I said always in the last year, I said the same, if you have the problem, then approach the government. Then we will solve it together. If you see the National Program of Infrastructure, actually in the section of the Ministry of Communications and Transportation, there is a difference in 58% of the resources are coming from the private sector. So we develop a new law from the public-private partnerships that we can develop together with you. We are trying to implement this study of the logistics platforms together, and we are looking for a pilot program that could start. So I open this I'm open to listen if you want to participate, because we are looking the first logistic platform together with the Ministry of Economy. We already make a selection, a small selection, and then if you can provide us with the correct information, perhaps we can work together to solve a specific problem, because we see a huge country with a geography that is quite hard to manage with the infrastructure. But if we are in the right lane with you, then we can transport everything together.
But how do you, I mean, it's easy to say, just approach the government. How do you approach the government? Should it be through AMIA? Should it be through another association? Should it be directly?
You could approach directly. You could approach with the association. That is better for you. But we listen everyone, and that's why, or actually, is the beginning of projects are starting with the companies coming to the government and then asking for what can be done together. Mm-hmm. And this is an example you see with Kansas City. There is a lot. This rail pass bypass in Celaya is one example. Then we have in Coatzacoalcos, in Manzanillo, in Veracruz, in the border, actually, the bridge, the railway bridge that I mentioned, Matamoros-Brownsville. It took like 13 years to be constructed, starting from the local people. And then when we had the companies together, and then the interest, and then the planning together, then it was built in 5 years. So the negotiations start with you, because otherwise we will be blinded if we are not listening to the private sector.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Very good answer and good question. I'm afraid we've run out of time now because we have to get ready to go through to the lunch, because we have a special guest speaker there as well. Before I do, I just wanted to mention that after the lunch we have the think tanks. They're very hard for me to describe. All I can say is at the end of the conference they're often voted the most valuable part of the conference. So please join the think tanks after lunch. Please also don't plan on going home early, because we have a fantastic final session with some of the most important car makers in Mexico, talking about their challenges and their plans for the future. Also, the room is changing round at lunchtime into round tables, so please take your things with you, your bags and so on, so they don't get mixed up or lost. And also, if you don't mind, please joining us quickly through to the lunch to enable us to have good, timing for the speeches and so on. But most importantly, for now, I'd like to thank the panel for another very interesting session. Thank you.